Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Baggage Claim. I am Katrina.
I'm Julia, and this is a show about living with mental health in today's society. Tonight's episode is about alternative treatments. And if you want to know what alternative treatments are, stick around to find out.
And I'm Mel, and we're here every Tuesday at 8 p.m. And we want to remind you that we are not mental health professionals. We are mental health patients. If you do feel that you are being triggered or that you need to be reaching out to somebody, go ahead and click on the link that I posted below in the comments. And we do want to let you guys know that some things we talk about can involve trigger warnings. We're not always going to know, but make sure that you're being aware. And if you feel that you need to step away, go ahead and step away.
Absolutely. I think that's a really important point. Thank you, Mel. Before we get started on our show today, ladies, I'd like to kind of say something, if that's okay.
Go for it.
A little side rant, if you say.
I love a good rant.
Yes.
Rant on, ranter.
Yeah, no, I just want everybody to know that, like, we are real people and we experience everything that we're talking about. So, like, right now, I'm really freaking depressed, like, really depressed and exhausted. And I think that's important for the audience to know. Like, you know, we're not always, like, we might seem all happy and okay, but we might not be underneath the surface. And that's just, like, what we're talking about all the time. But with that, I want to say that I do have a tribe behind me, and I have some amazing ladies right here who have really helped me get through the week. And that's just, you know, I usually do the thing of, like, you know what, you guys, like, I didn't do the research that I should have done for this show yet, and I'm a little bit behind. But the support is always there, and it's always like, it's okay, just get through it. We're going to make it. We're going to get this show out there. And that's what we do. But it's not always easy, right? Like, just like life. And I think just it's important to be honest with you guys. So that's my rant.
Thanks for sharing that, Katrina. Thanks for opening up like that. I think it's really important to be able to hear that and to recognize that you're another human being going through shit.
Exactly. and you, like, I guess, like, the point was, like, we really want to create a community here, right? And this is why. Because people experience these things. Feel free to always reach out to us, write in the comments. Let's create that tribe if you don't have one. And let's do this together.
I just want to weigh in here real quick because I think it's super important because one of the things that we're doing as we redefine our working relationship with each other is also giving people a map of their own. So when you do that stuff and you do reach out, and I think it is important and we get caught up. We haven't been doing this very long, but at the same time, it's like we're defining how we want to put our show out there, and we're being honest with each other, and we're being honest with our audience. And it really does feel good when you can put in the comments or, you know, our conversation, hey guys, I am behind, and not feel like you're going to get chastised or judged for that, but be understood because the people that you're in the group with I have plenty where I am behind on that or doing it Sunday night or whatever else, but I have a lot of faith, and it's like it grows stronger every week. Yay. But I have a lot of faith in this group, so I almost don't feel like, and the more we grow together, the more faith I have, and like it's gonna be fine. And the people that are reaching back to me are surprising me. Family members, friends who I've just all now that we've been here a little while who are watching. It's like, thanks for joining in, and I'm glad that it's getting that because that was the whole point.
Absolutely. We got to do it together. And with that being said, let's talk about some of the alternative mental health therapies out there. And we have a rant about that as well.
It's a rant-filled night.
I'll start out with...
It wasn't rant night, though.
Finding research about certain things, you know, illegal substances, we'll talk about them as we go, is really hard to find research on. And we know that's because of limitations with the government and what we can and cannot test. So ladies, like, can you tell me a little bit about just what you went through to kind of find anything?
Yeah, I think when I started researching this topic, I just figured off the top of my head, oh, there's going to be this plethora of information out there. And I just go and I type in alternative treatments because I didn't even know what I was looking for yet. I wanted to see what was out there.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't want to pigeonhole myself from the beginning. I wanted to just like open it up. And I just type in alternative treatments for mental health. And like nothing comes up, like zero, zilch, nothing. And we realized as we went that I texted the other girls immediately and said, is this just me? Like, am I searching wrong? Am I doing this wrong? And then we all realized, no, we're all having the same experience. And, you know, Big Pharma has such a chokehold on this industry that they don't want information on alternatives and healing methods out there that don't involve prescriptions. So that was really eye-opening and shocking to find out. I just never expected that. Did you guys?
Yes and no.
Yeah,
I mean, not
yeah.
to the, like, because I've been hearing so much about this word that Mel is going to have to say.
Psilocybin.
Yes, thank you. And ketamine and things like that. Like, I've been hearing all about these treatments. My sister's going through, you know, one, but you can't find any research on it. You can find clinics for it, right? I found a lot of that, like just clinics, but no hard studied like research.
Yeah, there's like a million, you know, yoga studios as they were, but which ones are the ones that I should go to? And I found with one that I've even had done to me in the past, and it was the distant past. And I was like, wait a minute. And it was like at the early part of my treatment where the vitamin B12, which, you know, so I was like, okay, why was I using this? It was for mood. And then I went looking at it and I was like, oh, okay. So vitamin B12 deficiency is a legitimate situation that people have as a result of things like gastrointestinal situations. And because it's stripped from your stomach often when you get older, or so it's a stomach lining thing where the B12 is produced, or the gastrointestinal situation. And so as you age, it can be depleted, or certain conditions can deplete it. But also, like, a daily vitamin has enough B12 to potentially supplement that. Being a vegan or vegetarian can, because nothing in those diet schemes has a natural producing protein that produces the B12 specifically, but the B vitamins at large that you need. And so they actually recommend vegans and vegetarians take B supplements more than anything, which you think, oh, protein or something. No, it's actually this. And it does affect your mood. But as far as being a mental health treatment, it was like, okay, this doctor was giving it to me as a form of mental health treatment. But really the root of it is, I feel like at that time, even I should have been tested for vitamin B12 deficiency. And I don't recall that happening. And so did I really need vitamin B12? I mean, it wasn't going to hurt me necessarily. I mean, some of the supplements have niacin in them, and that can be bad for you. But here's a treatment I've had before, and it's been, you know, a good over a decade. But the fact that I'm like retro looking at my, you know, like we always talk about with the journey, I'm looking back at my treatments and going, holy crap. Like, this was something that I was doing, and I didn't fully understand it at the time. So, and it's been this many years, and that's all the much more I can tell you about it.
I find that though with even pharmaceutical medications and things like that with mental health is like, I couldn't tell you like what this one does. I mean, they tell you what it does, but who knows what it's really doing. So,
and you know they're not doing it perfectly because they have to give you a lot of them usually before you find the one that works for you. So even as much as pharmaceutical has, here's this information, well, yes, but you still had to give me 12 different pills before you landed on the one that worked for me.
Yeah. So should we just start going down the list of things that we have done?
Yeah, I think that'd be great.
Okay. So I can start with TMS, which is Transcranial Magnetic Stimulation Therapy. I did this about 4 to 5 years ago, and before I even like get into the therapy itself, what I love about TMS is like that's how I found out or was diagnosed bipolar too. So it was through that treatment. I had a manic episode. I had the right doctor who understood what was going on. And was able to give me that right diagnosis. So with that diagnosis, the treatment plan changed a bit. So transcranial magnetic stimulation, they put like this cap on your head, and they find the like neurons in your brain that aren't usually like being activated, and that might cause the depression or the anxiety, something like that. And they stimulate it. It feels like tapping right on your head over and over, and they increase it over time. And this is done every day. I think I did it for, it's like 6 to 8 weeks. The treatment, I don't think it's supposed to be a one-off treatment. I do think you are supposed to go like every year, is recommended. But I honestly can say I didn't notice that big of a difference from it, except that, wow, I was diagnosed with what I have, and like that changed my life. So, I have seen, like, people have said it has worked for them. I think it is really specifically for like depression. Okay, you have depression. Okay, you have anxiety. Just like, when you're diagnosed with one specific thing.
Yeah,
That's weird.
I've had the reverse done. I've only had the one where they are measuring the electricity coming out of your brain, not putting anything back into your brain. So I've worn the cap, but for the EEG and not for that situation. So, but I had heard of it. I'd never known anyone who's tried it or tried it. It sounds like, ooh, I tried something new, but who's had it, as a part of their treatment. So
Yeah. It's becoming, I think, a lot more common. My psychiatrist here has like mentioned it to me, and I had to say, hey, remember I've done that. But yeah, I hear about it a lot more, I think.
So do you have to be part of a study to get it, or can anyone get it through their doctor?
Yeah, I mean, it's usually recommended through a psychiatrist, and then you go to like a clinic. A lot like these clinics that open up for the, ketamine and things like that. It's kind of like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that I would. I feel like there's science there because of the stuff I've had done to my brain on the other direction, knowing that they were pinpointing places on my brain. So in terms of having neurological information on which parts of our brains do what they do, we're certainly at a place where we have the most knowledge that we've had so far. So if something were going to start to work in that regard, I think we're in a time or that is a road that you could go down if it was something that was being administered ethically, which would be my only concern with something like that, because it's hard to say. I mean, I think that people immediately, when they first saw it, I know that my first reaction was like, oh my God, is that electroshock therapy? And then it's like, no, this is like very mild. This is no different than using like a TENS unit on your lower back or something. It's probably even less than that, considering what they use on
pretty high.
Does it?
Yeah, it can get pretty like painful.
So it is like using a TENS on your brain. Have you ever used like a TENS unit on your back or like on my?
No, but I mean, the goal of it is to re-stimulate those neurons in your brain that are not stimulated.
Right.
That's it. Like I think that's to make it as simple as it can be, And I think it works on some people. I do. I think people probably do have positive experiences.
If anyone out there has had a positive experience, please tell us.
Let us know.
No, I've talked to people, like when I was at Mayo, I talked to a lot of people who had done TMS studies, and they it really helped with their depression.
See, and that might be what it's like really for.
Yeah, that seems like the most logical thing because of like what happens to your brain when you get depressed and what parts of your brain start to do, like they stop because it stops producing serotonin. So, or it slows it.
Okay, so moving on to the next is cannabis. I think some of us have some experience with this. This is something that I want to say with a stipulation. I do use cannabis, and I use it like my medication in the sense of like not in every strain is going to work for me. It's like finding the right prescription, right? Like what strain is best. So I want to just put that out there. That it's just not a free for all. But it does, for me, the best way I can say that marijuana like helps me is it makes me feel normal. It makes me feel the most normal that I, can feel.
It's
What about
definitely
yours?
mood. In my experience, also, I've been a medical cannabis user for quite some time in states that were big on it and have been able to. I've been fortunate because my path in life kind of bounced me around to states like Washington, where the doctors that were out there were actually actively trying to study it, and they were able to get some inroads by way of, federal grants through the Common Club. Look at me, I'm seeing people commenting. Hi, everyone. Welcome. But through the University of Washington and other such programs, those universities have federal grants and permissions and so forth. So that's why you saw like places like Colorado and Washington were big leaders on it. And so I was able to really have discussions. And microdosing, which as a general concept is something that if you don't really understand microdosing, go Google that, go take a quick look at it. Because the idea is that, and that's like you said, it's a normalizer for me. So instead of taking a mood stabilizer that's pharmaceutical, that for me, as someone who I have trouble with medications, part of the reason I had to have my surgeries was because I had an intractable form of epilepsy that was resistant to medication, thus needed to be cured by this surgery that has been more widely available. 10 years later, it's something that they use for intractable epilepsy patients much, much more often. So as someone who's not great with medicine, who's had to work really hard at it, that's one thing that for as far as like mood, especially CBD particularly. So sleep, anxiety, which my anxiety definitely is a spiral for my seizures. So to keep my anxiety down and keep my panic down and keep those things, my heart rate down and all of those things because of the relational situation, well, a microdose of medical cannabis and the right strain brings me down. I can have a seat, I can take a breath, I can get the brain fog out of my way, and I can say, hey, part of your disorder, not part of a larger situation that's happening. And again, like Katrina said, trial and error, but in at least right vein. And I think what's really sad as we keep going back to that is this can't be studied because of the disorderly legalization, non-legalization, the way that this state next to this state next to this state. The reason that we can't get together as a society and study these things that may help people is because we have some very, what I would call illogical policies in relation to things that are listed with things like heroin, while they have less of an effect than even some of the medications I've been put on legally. So,
I mean,
by
absolutely.
far, and I'm
with someone who has ADHD and takes that type of medication.
Right.
I mean, come on, let's like take a meth.
It is.
I mean,
it's an amphetamine. It is directly amphetamine salt.
Absolutely.
So.
Yeah.
Now, I've never had a good experience with marijuana. I've only had terrible experiences with marijuana.
See?
But now I'm like wondering if I just never had the right strain.
Yeah, I mean, it can, yes and no, right? Like, it might just not be for you, and you just
I think my body doesn't tolerate it.
Exactly, yeah.
It's been a nightmare every time I've tried.
And, like,
there's
who
a whole
wants to go
class
through
of
that?
people.
Like, I'm going to go through nightmares to try to find something that works. Like, no, you don't want to do that again.
Well, there's a whole class of people who don't. There is a very serious issue with things like THC sickness and having too much THC in your system, which is the psychoactive ingredient in marijuana. That can be very problematic for people with things like schizophrenia. And I mean, again, doing this, it's like where you bounce around and you find what you find, and some of the things where be careful, because if you're not properly doing it, and that's dangerous, it's dangerous on both sides. So people who might be able to use it and tolerate it aren't getting it. And people who should not be using it are potentially using it to self-medicate.
Yes, Joseph, yes. It's true.
Exactly
I can attest to that.
Yes.
And that's such a super important part of the whole entire mental situation. Like when we're talking about mental health, we talk about that over and over. And that's why we don't name medications very often here on the show and that we're directly taking, because what didn't work for me may very well work for a large portion of the people. I have that with a medication that I can't take, that I'm literally intolerant to, allergic to, that my best friend is taking.
No, absolutely.
And it works for her. So
it is different for everybody, and your side effects are different.
Oh, yeah.
You know, they're not always the same. But let's keep going down the list because we do have like kind of a big list. I'm going to let Mel say this because I just say shrooms or mushrooms.
It's psilocybin or psilocybin mushrooms,
Mushroom.
magic mushrooms sometimes.
So this is one that I did start to microdose about 2 years ago. I'm not currently, but I mean, this is one where I felt the effects of it. You know, it's not like I was going into like the psychedelic dream that the mushrooms usually would give me. But they stimulate that part of the brain that is not normally stimulated. And really, I was less anxious. I was able to get all my work done. I had more energy. It was very strange.
It
But
does feel
wonderful.
weird sometimes. Doesn't it make you feel weird sometimes when you actually are being effective, when things are working
Yeah.
right, your therapy's working, your, you know, whatever kind of therapies are working, everything's normal. It almost scares you sometimes. You're like, what's
Katrina,
happening?
if it was working, why did you stop doing it?
Great question.
Well, right. Okay. It's a problem of where I live and growing them or buying them. Or,
Right.
Right. So I only want to be so illegal.
Got it.
Yeah.
Well, there are clinical trials happening for, I didn't know anything about shrooms because I've never microdosed or anything. But in my research, I learned that there is clinical trials happening for the treatment of addiction, depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, and anxiety. So it can help with all those
Yeah.
things, which is really
I believe
awesome.
it.
It makes sense too, I think, because of what kinds of things. Again, just like with the TMS, it's the kinds of things that thing is stimulating that seems to make sense.
Yeah.
We really need to make more treatments legally
Just-
available to research.
Well, and to like the common patient, not just in a you know, like not somebody that's next to a hospital or a great university.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, because
just
what, 6
moving.
places in this whole, we have 350 plus million people, and Lord knows how many of us need the treatment that we're looking for. And it cuts a whole segment of potential treatment to make people better out of the deal. And that's unfortunate at best.
Yeah.
Because of the war on drugs, the good old war on drugs.
Yeah. And as I like to say
Right.
every time, the drugs won. That would
Well,
have
the
farther.
pharmaceuticals definitely won on that.
Yeah, they won. They won it all.
I mean, but you know, and that does, pharmaceutical drugs have wreaked havoc on rural communities, particularly in their own ways.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, that creates mental health issues too.
Absolutely. The next one is ketamine. And we do have a video on ketamine that I want to watch. I hope you guys are okay with that.
Yeah, let's go.
But I also want to add that my sister is getting ketamine treatment in the Bay Area in California. And can I tell the story real quick before I watch the video?
Yeah, of course. Go for it.
So she started on the ketamine trial and had a really hard time with the ketamine. It was just really, she said, wiped her out. Like, it was just too much. So there's this other thing called Spravato. And Spravato is part of the ketamine, I want to say, is it molecule or cell?
Yeah.
It's part of it, and it's just it's a lower dose than like a ketamine is. But she's having amazing results. Like, she says that her anxiety, like, we're people that will go from 0 to 100 like in a freaking second, and she says that like that doesn't even happen anymore. Like, and her anxiety is so much better. But like, it's really the fact of like something happens and she processes it without acting first. You know, something changed in her brain
That's awesome.
yeah,
Slowed
it
her
was
down
really-
enough for her to be able to think about it.
Exactly, which is really interesting.
It's huge.
Like, that's huge. Anyway, okay, let's get to this video. My apologies.
All right.
All right.
No, thanks for sharing.
Have you asked me anything?
How's it going? How does it feel?
Incredible.
What are the thoughts that are in your mind?
That we're all connected, that we're all together, that like it's just so clear, like we are all in this together.
What is this? We're all in this together. What is this?
Well, I mean, like our lives, our purpose, our soul. We're all, it's crazy how we're all together.
Yeah.
I can tell that I'm very everyone should feel what it is like to feel this connected to everyone. It's incredible. On a science level or a neurological level, what's going on during the treatment?
During the treatment, ketamine is known to modulate the so-called glutamate receptors in your brain. Glutamate is an important neurotransmitter in the brain. It's an amino acid. It's one of the building blocks of protein, but it also is involved in the signal processing of brain chemistry. And it tends to open up different foci in the brain, different areas that help make you feel much better in terms of your mood.
How you doing, Kyle?
Great.
Hold on,
I want
really
some
fast,
of what
Just-
what
I
he's
just-
having.
I did too, but really fast, Joseph. Personally, I can't say that word.
Just say shroom.
Mushrooms help me with depression. It feels like I don't know if it makes sense, but like a reset. Totally. I totally understand that.
I do have.
So I want some ketamine now.
I like, it's interesting because I think a lot of people that have a stigma attached in their own mind from their own point of view to drugs are like, oh, look at this hippie. But I think that there's an importance that needs to be highlighted is when you're depressed or feeling that low where you're into a cycle, I know from my personal experience, if I were to feel that in the middle of some of my deepest, darkest depressions, that could potentially save me from doing bad things to myself or maybe even save my life. Because depending on how dark the depression is getting at any given time, to have a moment of lucidity in those times is very important. And that is part of what your medication is supposed to do. So if you have heavy depression, if you have heavy manic cycling where you're on the low end of that, which is hard to manage your way out of with every tool you've ever been given, you'll still have those days where you're like, I know all the things I need to know about mental health. I just swung down, and loathing, hatred, like all of those things that you feel in that isolation hole. If you were to go to a treatment, if that was part of your weekly, monthly, whateverly treatment, and you went there and had a chance to sit down and have that thing and remember that we're all connected and that we're all in this together and that I am a meaningful part of the journey here, that's a huge light in the darkness of depression, in my opinion, as someone who's had deep, dark depressions. If that were what my medication were to do for me in my deepest, darkest things, good. Like, get that help to people, because staying in that isolation hole is not good. And that's where the really long hurt comes from. So, I mean, I think
like
that
taking a good trip. Like,
Yeah,
right? Like
yeah.
if you've ever
what's
tripped, like,
wrong
it's
with
like,
that? I think that we've
it's
made it.
eye-opening.
I think that we've made tripping balls. I think that because it has this negative connotation, it's like, no, sometimes people just need that for healthy. They need to remember their place in the world and the universe. It's real dark here sometimes. And when you are mentally ill or have any mental health needs, i.e. everybody, You need that once in a while. And I don't think that we should be demonizing it.
To say over, you can hear over and over again, you're not alone, you're not alone, you're not alone, and still feel like the only person on earth. But to actually feel that connection,
Exactly.
that is so much different. To actually feel that embrace of like the love of the universe. I mean, I would, yes, please sign me up.
Yeah, right. It's life-saving. That saves lives.
I do want to add that with her, my sister's experience, insurance did not cover it, and it was out of pocket, and it was not cheap. And so I think that's another thing we got to talk about. These treatments are not cheap. They cost thousands of dollars, and you probably need more than one.
No, that's a really good reality check to have. Yeah. Unfortunately.
Yeah, and I think when you have something even as simple as cannabis, when you a preponderance of states this moment have legalized medical cannabis. It's over half the states in this nation alone that have legalized. You have two issues there. One means that needs to be medical treatment that's covered by my insurance on some level. And the other is that needs to get out of Schedule 1 because that's baloney and it doesn't need to go on because we should be helping people and not hurting them with our tax money.
Oh my God, could you imagine the insurance company paying for my weekly bag of weed?
That would be amazing. We should all imagine that.
Actually, it'd be great because then the people that do delivery services would be covered under federal mandates. They'd have insurance. It would, I mean, the problem with any of these is like, we can laugh about it, but it would largely improve the life of everybody involved with the situation, whether it's the patient, the caregiver, or anybody in between. And all it means is it goes back into the system that we all participate in, and it pays for our firemen, and it pays for our garbage people, and it pays for city sewer. I mean, that's where that money would go ultimately in a reality situation. We would pay taxes and it would go to fund schools.
Yeah.
So.
All right, let's see what's up next. It's acupuncture. So Mel, this is you and maybe Julia, because I just want to say that I was always told that acupuncture was not a science, and not that it has to be a science, but it didn't help it didn't really help or do anything.
It is easy to dance into pseudoscience, and I think that all of us, regardless of what things we assign ourselves to, ultimately we're not looking for the hooey. We don't need it. We're not looking for snake oil. We're looking for meaningful treatment. And so, yes, I was a huge skeptic of acupuncture. I am the this is like the skeptic Scully, no, not a freaking chance in the world, like this cannot possibly be real. Julia said something really telling to me this week that I've been actually pondering on, because you said it very, very simply, and you said Eastern medicine is medicine, and it is a very Western moment that I had when we were having that conversation. It's like, duh, these people, this society is thousands of years older than Western society. So no kidding, there's actually we've been practicing the medicine. And
okay, but then you can if you go that route, you can get into the oils of course. And we don't want to go there. That's not what I just want to make sure that's not what we're talking about.
But it did make me think
it can be a line. Julia's laughing at me, but it's a fine line.
But I think it was an important point for me to get back to thinking about, okay, there's all kinds of science on the planet, and ours is seen through one lens, and other sciences out there that might be harder to evaluate, let's say, because you can't necessarily get clear, focused pictures of what's been studied in countries that aren't your own. And that's kind of where I'm going to leave that. And the bigger issue here is, okay, so acupuncture, right? So of course, it's portrayed as look at the guy that looks like a, Hellraiser or a pincushion or whatever. And it's no. This was actually people kept recommending this same doctor to me. I was like, all right, I'm really desperate for some anxiety relief was my big thing. And it was such anxiety that it was creating a lot of pain. And I got this guy's name. So I finally went over there. And what was amazing is I was off insurance at the time. And he was fairly expensive for what he did, but not overly expensive. And he charged Medicare pricing for people that needed it. So he just took the Medicare price and applied it to anybody that was off insurance. So it made it very reasonable for me to afford. They were very forgiving in the payment scheme. It was a community place. All the people that were in there loved him. He would go through the motions and he would always say, how about that? How about that? And he had a very even keel about him. He's a very cool doctor. And I had 2 pins in me. One was a forehead one, and one was on one of my wrists. And it was 45 minutes, and he set them there, and he played calming music, and it was very cool in the room, and a couple of like blessings in, you know, that he did himself. And I've never felt better. I miss that doctor because that 45 minutes a couple times a month did a lot for my mood. And that's not medicine. That's not anything particular. It's a couple of pins and some calming situation and him talking to me about what was bothering me and me pointing, not like he's just sticking it close. He's like, where? And then he like associate the pressure points basically. And even before I went to him, I still had to go into like my own Google click hole of like, is this real? Is this real? And I just kept turning up, including what I turned up this time. There is a lot of studying that's been done, especially by universities again. There's an overwhelmingly positive feedback on acupuncture as a whole when prescribed as a form of meditation, pain relief, and mental health therapy in general. So I'm an advocate because it worked for me and it worked great. And if I found the right, practitioner of acupuncture, which I just haven't really looked that hard since I've finally settled down here, but I'd be back into that if it was something that was affordable and available to me.
Yeah, I mean, I had a similar experience as far as it being positive. I first encountered acupuncture as a teenager when I could find nothing to help my migraines. No medications or painkillers were working, and I was debilitated to the point that I was missing school almost every week. And we finally decided to give acupuncture a try, and went out and met with the doctor. We had to drive a couple hours to get to this doctor outside of town, and he was incredible and very skilled. And lo and behold, my migraines went away for the first time ever in my whole life. And I had never experienced anything like that. I went there for years, and the whole time I was there, the migraines were under control. And then I left for college, and so I stopped going. And then later in life, I was reintroduced to acupuncture from a mental health perspective as something that might be able to help my bipolar and help my symptoms of mania and depression. And my experience with that was that it didn't take the symptoms away necessarily so much as it made me feel so much more resilient to meet those symptoms, that I could deal with them and cope. And I felt much stronger and just healthier in general. I don't know if you experienced that, Mel. I think you did. You said you felt really good. Yeah, it was really, you just feel really alive was my experience. And I was really happy to have had those and to have met some people in the from the Eastern community here, because it brought like an added culture into my life as well.
Which is good for everything. I mean, it's always healthier to learn. I think you're exactly right. Like you just nailed it, is the coping portion of it. It didn't take away everything that was going on with my PTSD, but it did help me feel able to rise up to the challenge. Honestly, that ketamine, that kind of brings it back to that ketamine situation, is that feeling like that rising to me, we're part of it. There's a community around us. There are people. There's the tribe situation that you were talking about. We're not alone here. We're part of a universe. And I think that that's an interesting thing for me just at this moment as I'm listening to this, learning something even as we're on air here, is that is a big thing about therapy, is it is that consciousness and that ability to cope. And I like how you put that, rising up to meet my disease, like being able to head on instead of letting it get the better of me, which is not, I don't want it to be victorious. I don't want it to define me. So when I find a therapy, a treatment that is able to help me be in control of that as much as I'm ever going to be in control of it, that is always a positive thing.
All right, shall we move on?
Yes. So next is
I think,
Woo,
just
it's
jump in, I think
yeah.
that we were talking about things that we've had personal experiences with, right? And now we're
Yeah.
going to talk about treatments that we haven't personally experienced, but we've researched, so we just know a little bit about. So we're just going to share a little bit about these following treatments with you.
Thank you. So Brainspotting.
Not train spotting like I see it every single time.
I know. So this was developed by David Grand, and okay, some of these are a little bit hard to explain, but from what I can gather, okay, instead of just reading you like this paper, when you move your eyes a certain way, right? It can bring up a trauma, or it can bring up feelings of depression, anxiety. That's what it's trying to do. You want to focus, like, also when you move your eyes around, it changes the signals in your brain, right? So when you're on something and your eyes are like this, and you say, oh, okay, this is a deep trauma, well, you know that it's a certain part of the brain because of where your eyes are located. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm trying. So that's the therapy. It's basically doing those movements over and over again, walking through the trauma, figuring out where it is in your brain, trying to normalize it, things like that.
Cool.
Okay, this makes sense to me because there's a therapy for people with, I have a hemianopsia, which is a missing peripheral vision. And one of the ways that they teach you so that you don't get dizzy by flipping your head around a lot extra, because when you don't have the vision field that a normal person has, you move your head side to side more often, which can make you dizzier. So they train you to do what they call saccading. And it's that you look up and over as opposed to turning your head back and forth to look. So you do train. So there is neurological value here, for me at least, in something else that I've learned about related to a neurological issue, because my left eye works, both of my eyes work, but the ending where it plugs into that part of my brain is missing. So I am missing peripheral vision on one half of us. It's called a hemianopsia, which is half. So, when you see in a cone, I'm missing half of the cone on one side. So they teach you, instead of like flipping your head all around, so there is definitely value in this because they use it for other treatments, for other neurological issues. So it does make a lot of sense to me. I'm actually fascinated.
Yeah, it actually is really fascinating. I'd recommend anybody to look it up and see if it might benefit you. The next is Neurofeedback Therapy. Okay. This one is where you're hooked up to you have a cap on, you're hooked up to a computer, and that computer is hooked up to a control. And the control is usually the doctor. Excuse me, 1 second.
Look at that responsible cough.
So
that right there is pandemic responsibility coughing. Congratulations. Right? You win.
Can't spread those germs.
No, that's good.
I'm going to look at my notes here. Basically, it's used with like children and adolescents and adults with seizure conditions, behavior disorders, attention deficit, autism, insomnia, anxiety, depression. I guess that's like everybody. But it's a once a week session for 20 weeks, and it's basically using your brain the same way that the other ones use your brain waves. The computer's doing that as well as the control. The control's doing that with the computer to go to you.
That makes sense. Like that. I mean, they do testing like this, so.
That one was a little bit, it's hard for me to explain.
You did great. I think you did great.
Guys.
Good job.
I feel like we're in class and we like all had to do our research and then bring it to the table, and we're going to get graded by our audience. Please like, subscribe, and comment. Okay.
You get an A+ from me every time.
Hypnotherapy.
Yeah.
Woo!
Yeah, okay,
like the thing. I don't know why I said that I had never been hypnotized, because I have been hypnotized. I have been hypnotized in therapy before. And I don't know why that slipped my mind. I'm still clucking like a chicken. No, just kidding. But so basically, first I'll tell you what hypnosis is. During hypnosis, a trained psychologist or hypnotherapist uses guided relaxation techniques to elicit feelings of extreme relaxation, focus, and concentration with the hope of helping the patient achieve a heightened level of consciousness. So that is how it works, basically. And when you see like this thing, like the clock going back and forth or whatever, that's not unreal, because to put you into that deep trance-like state, they have to have something, your eyes following that movement over and over slowly, along with like slow down breathing, put you into that trance, so that you're able to be in this other state of consciousness. So when I did it, it was a really good experience. I did it to recover some memories that had been hidden from my conscious mind, and it was very effective at that. And I would, if I had a need for it, I would do it again for sure. So it was definitely helpful, and the change in consciousness can help some patients or clients view real life situations in a different light. So it can help you with work conflicts. It can help you with anxiety. It can help you with stage fright, even relationship issues. Lots of different things this could be used for. So keep in mind.
That's cool.
I've been skeptical of hypnotherapy, but I've seen more and more science on it, and some of my nerdery, which is things like PSYOPs, where you look into how heavily some of our branches of government have actually gone into these things and gotten viable results out of it that have been like revealed to the public from as far back as the 70s, makes you think, okay, there's got to be something here. And I have also had friends, and this is anecdotal, but it's still people I trust and rely on and would not, BS me, have said, no, this was very helpful to me. And if you, as someone who's experienced what they call an absent seizure, which is where you're still there and it seems like you're paying attention to everything and you're still in the room, but you have drifted off in your own mind. And I mean, where you will literally, you blank out. It's like daydreaming, but heavy, where you like you couldn't tell the person what they were saying to you. You couldn't know that you were in the room. Even sometimes people act or react while they're having an absence seizure and don't even realize it. And I've actually experienced this before. So knowing that the brain is capable of these things completely has changed my perception of what perception can be, and if it's guided. And I think it's more important. A lot of, you, like you said, the pendulum, the watch, the snake oil salesman coming down the road. I think a lot of these things have been conflated with the actual real. Our brains are very powerful, and the chemical interactions in our brains are very powerful. And if you can learn to harness those things, you can really help people. And I've known people who have quit smoking through hypnotherapy, and that's a result that just speaks for itself. And I'm a big fan of success. So if it worked for you and it's worked for people, I think that that's viable. And I think it's just like anything. I don't like to stigmatize any particular kind of therapy. I try to be careful because I don't like it when my therapies are stigmatized, and I don't think it's healthy. If anything, let's actually debunk the thing for real by science and scientific method, then just kind of poo-poo it because, necromancers and stuff. Don't need that.
All right, let's keep going. Cognitive control training. This is our last one, I believe. Right?
Yes, it is. Cognitive control training is, I'm going to have to refer to my notes because I'm just learning about this one. But basically, there's different types of cognitive control training. Some are computer-based memory exercises. You would listen to a series of numbers and compute the sum of the last two numbers heard. You could use transcranial direct current stimulation, which delivers weak electrical currents over the scalp, things like that. But basically, recent studies have explored the link between depression and executive function, which is the ability to process and organize information in order to achieve a goal. And the specific aspect of executive function that is linked to depression is executive control, which includes the ability to regulate cognitive processes such as emotion. So that's huge. And we're talking about the thing that regulates our emotions. So if you have a greater level of executive control, you're more likely to be able to control your reactions to stressful events and less likely to develop depressive symptoms. So as a result of these findings, cognitive control training has been suggested as a possible new treatment for depression.
Okay, but what is okay?
There's different
It can
types
be a
of like,
series of things.
yeah, it could be computer-based. It's stimulating different parts of your brain, like this. All of these treatments are doing is stimulating different parts of your brain, right? But computer-based memory exercises. You could listen to a series of numbers and compute the sum of the last two numbers heard.
Okay,
There could be.
I've done
I had a
this.
hard time understanding that, but
I've done this. They did a major psychological eval on me in the hospital after all my surgeries were done so they could tell me what I was and wasn't good at. And this actually makes sense to me because they make you like look at a series of faces and then they ask you to remember the faces or remember, ironically, because this was in the news recently, but they'll make you remember, they'll tell you 3 words at the beginning of this thing. And the therapy goes on for the session will go on for 2 or 3 hours. And then they'll be like, tell me those 3 words I made you remember at the beginning. And it's literally to test your long-term memory.
Yeah, let me just tell you this one study. So there was, it was to identify and sequence the emotions of people to a treatment group of 11 participants and basic control training with neutral stimulus to a control group of 10 participants. So the cognitive emotional control group targeted improvement in working memory and emotion identification, 2 aspects of executive function. Okay, that doesn't really say anything more than I just said. Sorry. But basically, they tracked the initial executive function and depression level of the participants and tracked changes over 4 weeks. And patients who were exposed to the cognitive control training actually improved by 50%, which is a huge number. Despite the short period of time that they had, they already improved 50%. So they definitely think that this one is worth additional studies, and it should be something that's actually used as a treatment for depression.
That's cool.
That's interesting too.
I still think my favorite out of everything we've learned today is this ketamine thing.
Yeah, that's interesting. And that one's, gosh, it's those things are behind because of just all the things that we've talked about. So I really feel like I had heard inklings of that one for a long time, but
Well,
I'm glad.
I hate to say this, but the other ones that like we talked about later on, like that kind of felt like it takes a lot of work.
I do like the emotional investigation portion of it. I mean, I think that one of those things that's true is that when you get the words to identify your emotions, it does help you manage them later. Like, why am I
when you have that vocabulary.
Yeah, like, why am I feeling, I'm actually feeling sad. I completely agree with you, but yeah, like, when you can say I'm feeling sad and it's okay to feel sad and that's why. I mean, I think that is a value thing. It's just
So
it's
I
all
mean,
a
like,
lot.
what do you guys, think? And I'd love if the audience has any comments about, these alternative treatments. Do you think that they're getting enough airtime? Like, do enough people know about them? I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I don't think enough people know about them. I think they should be shouted from the rooftops. These treatments are just as viable as any medicines, I think. I mean, no medicine works for every person, and these treatments don't work for everyone. But when you're talking about a 50% improvement rate over just a period of 4 weeks, I mean, that's nothing to sneeze at, certainly.
Yeah. So
Ayahuasca.
Joseph asked about ayahuasca.
I'm mixed on ayahuasca because I don't know a lot about it. I know that I believe there's a pilgrimage factor about it where I don't believe in doing anything unless I'm with somebody who knows what they're doing. So if I were ever in a situation where that became a viable option for me and I felt like I was in a safe space for me, and this is something that's true about me no matter what I'm doing, I will never undertake any sort of therapy treatment I would never do anything I couldn't feel comfortable with. That goes as far as like when before we veered off into universe B here, that includes like going out. Anytime if I'm by myself and I go out and I feel uncomfortable in a situation, I remove myself from that situation. I won't drink in a situation I feel uncomfortable in. I won't do much of anything and that's partially my anxiety. My anxiety just disallows me from doing that. But that carries over to just judgment. So for me, unless I was in a trusted situation, I couldn't dismiss it out of hand is I guess my real answer to that is if I were in a situation where I was having that pilgrimage and going through the ayahuasca situation, sure, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, and I agree with you in a Common Club. Is that Blair?
Yeah.
Said, it's similar to a DMT experience, which is what I've heard, but it's administered by a shaman or a guide. I've just heard it's a very intense experience, and it really is a journey. Like, kind of like, what Mel said, that's a whole other world. You're going to a whole other world,
Yeah, almost quite literally for them. And I don't know. I feel like they say that if you're the kind of person who thinks you're going to have a bad trip on LSD, you're going to have a bad trip on LSD, so don't do it. And I think that is like the best advice that I've heard about anything like that. Because I think unless there's some overwhelming science that's going to take you out, I think that
I would love to do it. I would love to do it. I would do it in a heartbeat. I wouldn't even have to trust the person. Just give it to me. But I'm an addict, so I don't think that would align with my sobriety. I think I'd have to reset my sobriety date if I went down that path. But too bad I didn't do it before I got sober.
That's a fair answer.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know. Should we end the show?
Yeah, I think this was a great episode. Thank you, everybody, for joining in. Again,
thanks for all the comments.
Thanks for the conversation, guys.
It was a great conversation. I really didn't want to do the show tonight, honestly, and you guys made it all worth it. So we appreciate you. We'll be back next week, 8 p.m. Eastern, Tuesday. So check us out.
Bye, everyone.
For coming, everybody. Have a great night. Have a good week.